Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Michelle. That is epic. Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Today's guest, it's just us.
Yes.
It's us because it occurred to us that I've done all these books where I interviewed all these great people and had these amazing lessons and insights, and we've never talked about any of those things. And they will make you more successful for sure. They're interesting, enlightening, all of that stuff. And I'm curious to hear Michelle's take on a lot of these points too, because while I was investigating everything as an author, she was living it in the corporate world. So today is really an intense coaching experience through the eyes of many, many great women leaders that I have interviewed over the years. So welcome to the podcast.
Yes, welcome. This is going to be a fun one.
Okay. So one of the things I've written here in my notes is a lesson that I learned early on. And actually, I learned this one personally. I tell people, by all means, have a plan for your success, because that is the greatest piece of fiction you will ever write. In my case, I had a great plan. I was going to quit my job as a journalist, write my book, get this big bidding war on it, be really rich. Oprah would find it, and then it would just take off. But my book was rejected everywhere. It's a good thing it was, because I think it was much more successful because I had to fight for it. But I learned then that you can plan yourself to death and it will accomplish nothing. Nothing unfolds according to plan. If you've ever planned a party, a wedding, you know that. It's just plans give you an idea of where to go. I think they're great. I have plans all the time, but gosh, I don't think it works that way. So how about you, Brigman? What about your life?
Well, so that is why I have learned the hard way. So some hard-won wisdom is, like you said, I had a plan. I was going to be a pharmacist.
Like my dad.
Pharmacist. Yeah. Okay. People would have died on if I were a pharmacist, because my attention to detail is like it's non-existent. But so I think through that just journey of my own life, I have learned that I set intentions, and by setting intentions, it allows me to generally know where I'm going, and I can be fluid and navigate based on every day. You get a little bit smarter and you get a little more guidance around where you should be headed. So I'm an intention setter kind of gal now.
Well, that makes sense. And that's probably more helpful. I like this one slide I use when I'm speaking, because it shows somebody that's on a bicycle trying to ride the bike up to the top of a mountain. And they get to a peak, and then it drops, and they have to traverse over a bunch of big boulders. And then they have to climb the next set of hills on the mountain. And then they have to traverse a ladder. And then just when they think they're going to get there, it drops again, and there's a moat. And then the next one, there's this horrendous storm, and then they're at the top of the mountain and the sun is shining. And I love that, except I think there's one thing missing.
Uh-oh, what's that?
It's that when you get to the top, you have to kind of go back to the start, because you're never really there. Have you noticed that?
Well, I know. And isn't that what our past guest, Stacey Allison told us, the first American woman that summited Mount Everest? She talked about how once you reach the destination, then or when you get there, you immediately need to be planning for what's the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. You got to look back. But yes, because I also think you're naive, right? You don't know what you don't know yet. And you've got to be nimble and flexible and aware and open to be able to shift based on where life takes you. So yes, always have to.
And I think that, as particularly as someone who's been self-employed for so many years and knows so many other people who have been, you think you're there, but you have good years and bad years. And other people might think, oh gosh, she's got it so good, she does so well. But no, there are times when you're really struggling. And I think that's the same when people have jobs. You have times when you're really killing it and times when you're doing the minimum just to get through.
Good and bad. Well, it's also great advice for, I think, particularly people who are entering the workforce or still pretty new. A lot of times they've got their eye on a particular job title. And I have found that, or a industry or a job title. And I have found that if you relax some of that pressure, you may get further somewhere in a different industry at a different company. And I think that's also a piece too. I think back to your point you made originally, you have the plan, but it's a big piece of fiction. And I think it gives people a little bit of calm to know you're not failing if it's not working to plan, because I think it trips people up for a long time in their career because they keep trying to find their way back to that place and think they're failing when they're not there.
And right. And they think they're failing because the plan's not working. Life doesn't work according to plan. And the other thing is the universe will test you to see how much you want it. And so even though you have every single step plotted out, and they may be good, doable steps, something will happen to shake it up and say, do you really want this? And then something else. I mean, like that first book of mine got rejected everywhere, fight my way through it, get a bidding war, get a publisher, and it comes out the day before 9/11. My tour gets canceled. It's like every single step of the way, it's, do you really want this? No, you must not want it. And there were so many dark moments in that where I thought, gosh, if I don't get to be Fawn Germer, the author, who am I going to be?
Yeah.
And you have to decide whether you want to push forward or not. And I guess that brings me to another thing, and I'm curious your take on this, which is, can you be successful if you're not being true to your authentic self? If you're in a career or a job or even a relationship where you don't feel your best of who you are, can you succeed? Can you succeed if you're just doing it for the money or the health insurance?
Mm-hmm. It's hard, right? It's hard to reinvent yourself. It's hard to take a risk. It's hard to figure out your purpose and your drive, right? And be able to follow that intuition and trust that whatever door is opening up is the right one for you to walk through. It's scary. And I think, what you highlighted is how important grit and resilience is. So how gritty are you? How bad do you want it? Like, what are you willing to do in order to achieve your dreams?
But I think what I'm asking is, if it's not true to you, can you be confident enough to be successful with something that really isn't you? I mean, I'm asking that.
Well, what's your definition of success, right? Is success happiness? Is success title? Because I've been in roles, right, but if you look at everything on paper, I would say I was very successful. I wasn't happy. So what's your definition of success? And I think it's an individual thing. For me, that's why I left that company, because it did not make me happy. In fact, it drained the hell out of me, right? And I had to make some changes and find what did.
I would love to hear from listeners on that. If you've ever had to do something that didn't feel right, because I think when you're in the right fit, you're confident, you know what you're doing, you know how to drive the bus, and you're glad to be on that bus. And when it's not the right fit, so I'm curious how that works.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing, and we talked about this in an earlier podcast with Jody Williams, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. She said something that I thought was really important for a lot of people to hear, because I'd asked her the difference between an ordinary woman and the extraordinary woman. And she said the belief that she is ordinary. And I really have to ask our listeners to ask themselves, what are you telling yourself? Because if you think you're a superstar, then you're a superstar. If you think you're upper middle, you're upper middle. If you think you're average, you're average. If you think you're below average, that's what you're going to deliver. So you have to make the decision to get in the right pool where you can play, and then decide how far you want to go, because that's the way you define yourself is what will then define your performance. That's what I think. Michelle, have you seen that in action?
Yeah, well, I know from, in fact, a funny story. So I was progressing in my career in title, and I hit a point where I was an executive level, and I had an opportunity to go above. And I decided I didn't want to. I didn't it because I was looking at, I've had two pieces of advice on this. I have had one executive that told me, Michelle, when your name's in that box, you can do with that box anything you want. Right. So you get to rewrite the rules. Don't just think you have to play the way the predecessor did, which I think is incredibly good advice. But another piece of advice I had gotten was you get to choose your definition of success. And for me, having that much more responsibility, it wasn't attractive. Like, yes, it looked good, but I wasn't excited about making those decisions and doing that work. And I remember one of my recruiter friends that I spoke to all the time. I remember he's like, Michelle, I'm going to find you a job that gets you that next title. Like, that's my mission. Because he had worked with me a long time. And I said, well, good luck, because I don't think I want that next title. I have all these other things I want to be doing with my time, because I recognized, having been through that place that you mentioned, Fawn, a minute ago, where you lose yourself and your whole sense of purpose and your self-identity is so wrapped up in your job. And I could see I was going down that path and I didn't want to. So it allowed me to continue what I loved with corporate, but also introduce some new passions to redefine what success was for me.
Yeah, that brings me to two words that I think are really interesting, and I don't necessarily like them. One is the word potential, and the other word is ambition. And I don't like potential because it's usually used as some sort of a measure against us, other people's defining what our potential should be, where we can. It might not be falling short. It might be saying it's more than we can. There's your potential. But why is it someone else's business to define that for us? But the word ambition became interesting to me many years ago. My friend Carolyn, we were talking about our careers, and she goes, yeah, but I'm not ambitious. And I looked at her and I thought how brave it is to even be able to say that. Because if you go by the yardstick, which Michelle, you and I pretty much use that same yardstick. We both want successful careers, but to us, the bigger success comes by being happy. And if you look at that yardstick with her, she has lived an amazing, happy life. If her ambition was to be happy, she was more successful than 99% of the people I know. And she had the courage to define that for herself, to say, this is how I choose to live. Your yardstick doesn't work for me. And there are people who think that they have something wrong with them if they aren't as ambitious as other people. And I just want to give them a little bit of validation, because you don't have to be. I have always said if I would have worked 20% harder, I probably would have made 50% more money, because I didn't want to give my whole life to my work. I made great money. And I wanted to have a life where I could kayak and adventure and spend time with my family and know that I was here. And well, Michelle, as you know, I had a pretty big health issue this year. I had a bad concussion after a cycling accident, and it was a scary time. But the one thing you heard me say over and over again, and which everybody heard, was I have lived a life better than anybody I know. There are no regrets, none, happy, full, so that if I were to die tomorrow, okay, end of chapter. I did it. I did everything I needed to do. And so I'm curious about how you perceive those two words, potential and ambition, and how they've played out in your life.
Well, so it's interesting. I probably fall into the camp of using the word potential as believing more in someone and the possibility than they do, right? So, but I think I use it as almost like a something to entice them to come on, trust, go on faith with me, that the spot's waiting for you. Let's do it. I'll help support you, but let's do it. I've just learned the hard way that sometimes I may want it more than they do.
Right. Wow.
So potential's a difficult one but I never mean it as a, but to your point, I guess to your point earlier, yes, I'm saying it about someone else.
Yeah.
I'm saying it about someone else because I want them to believe in themselves.
What do you do if you've got a good employee who does not have ambition to do more?
We usually have that conversation, and then I support them where they are. I don't try to push them to something different. It's the person that I see expressing wanting more but being stuck and not going for it. And that's where I think that term potential, when I'm like, we're waiting for you. And I mean, Fawn, let's even go to a little of our history. The first time you and I met, I'm in this big transition in my own personal life. I meet you for the first time in Florida, and you're taking me around to meet all of your friends, and your friends they are at a level of lifestyle that it was more than executive. These are women that were driving really a lot of big changes in their communities, in corporate world. And you're like bringing me into the circle of all these women standing there like, oh, we're waiting for you. Like, we've been here waiting to support you. Where have you been? And I didn't even know they existed.
No,
like that
but we gotta have a caveat
that's a potential story.
But
I think
I don't want our listeners to think I'm in some elitist, super smart.
No.
There's no requirement like that to be in my gang, because they're at every level. And I think they're at a period of their life where a lot of them are also scaling back. So I live in a town that was founded by women, and so you see a lot of high-powered women, but the good people are there. And what I wanted to show you was how warm it was, so you would move here and be my neighbor, so we could grow up together, maybe grow up. I don't know.
But you saw these women like you, living a full life on all levels and being happy. It wasn't about what car they drove and what they owned. It was about the full life that was there, attainable.
It's because we don't dive into that. Mm-hmm. It's I live close to the beach because I choose to live close to the beach, and I try to go and swim there several times a week at sunset. And people are always like, oh, there are sharks. And I think, well, yeah, but I see about 200 people out here every night. And this is one of about 500 beaches in Florida. And you read 3 times a year that somebody gets bit. So I think my odds are good. But I take chances, and I live, and I hope other people do, because time's mm-hmm. wasting. Mm-hmm. One other thing I've learned over time is that we think we have all these problems, right? And we have to learn to discern the difference between a problem and an issue. And I was at dinner with some people yesterday, and I was just complaining about something. You know what it is, Michelle. I was just complaining. And then I got up to leave, and the woman sitting behind me was 100% bald from chemo. And I felt both embarrassed that I had been so upset about something that is not a problem, it's an issue, and grateful that what I have is an issue. And I think when my mom got sick, and then, when I lost both my parents, when somebody's sick or dying, that is a problem. But pretty much everything else is an issue, because we always find a way, don't we?
Well, yes, but it's okay to bitch about the little issues. I don't think you should feel
no, but I think
regret or guilty or ashamed that you just wanted to bitch about the stupid stuff that happens in life.
No, I want to call you on that one, because I think we are able to consciously decide what we're going to bitch about. It doesn't mean we have to make a decision not to have feelings about something, but if we're going to have a rant, we do have the power to decide whether to have it or not. And seeing how lucky I was that was all I had to complain about. It's like, by comparison, that was real gratitude to me. And I was 33 years old, and I was sitting in the newsroom in Denver, and my phone rang, and my mother had a massive stroke. And this is before they had reversal drugs, and this paralyzed her. And, 1 minute you're living your life normally, and then the next minute it is different for the rest of your life. Everything is colored and tainted by that one moment. And you don't get an advanced email saying, hey, make sure this is right. Or my mom didn't know that she was supposed to go for a bike ride the day before that happened, because it would never happen again. You don't get an advance on that. And I'm not saying that story to make people depressed, because my mom was courageous and she did have a lot of happiness, always to the end. But we have to be deliberate in how we live and choose the things that we get upset over, and how, and sometimes, Michelle, I'm going to call you and I'm going to bitch about things. I mean, that's it. I mean, I am, but I am going to be maintaining better perspective, because
that's awesome.
I'm healthy. You're healthy. Right. I mean, we're rich.
Well, and I think also, just in your lived experiences too, you have, you were, as I understand it, you were raised in an environment where you were pretty free to express, talk openly about your feelings. They were, everybody did. It was acceptable. I grew up in an environment where it wasn't. So now here I am, 50, unpacking all of that and learning I need to bitch sometimes about stupid stuff. I need a few minutes. Now, does it need to affect my day? And does it need to completely throw me off rail? No. But I am now honoring my feelings and my irritation about the stupid stuff that I've never allowed myself to do before. I do recognize it. I let it pass through me so it doesn't keep me bogged down. Sometimes it bogs me down, just being honest, like I'm human and we're all learning. But it's been a gift for me to learn how to just grab about stuff give me 10 minutes to rant.
Well, I'm going to give you that one then. Maybe I have to work on that. I still think, though, when you're ranting, that you're just ranting on an issue.
Oh, I know. I'm just ranting.
Yeah, you've got the perspective. Stuff. All right. So risk taking, that was one of the biggest lessons I ever got early on when I started interviewing, because I wanted to quit my job to write that first book. And it was taking too much out of me. And I was working in the newsroom, and I was getting home late, and I'd start writing at 9:00 at night until midnight. And then I'd get up at 4 and I'd start again. And then I did this interview with Sylvia Earle, the oceanographer, and she talked about how risk is everything. And, that's the only way she said, it's the only way to test your potential is taking a risk. And that's true. And that inspired me to want to quit. And then when I started to think, am I going to do this? I called Betty Williams, who won a Nobel Peace Prize for the nonviolence movement in Northern Ireland. And the thing about Betty was, she had come into my life when I was a reporter, and I was having that really bad boss. Mm-hmm. And I went to interview her, and I just said, I can't remember what I said to her about needing a little bit of mentoring. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, I can, in that Irish brogue, she's like, I can see that in your eyes. Wait, it's a Scottish brogue, isn't it? Well, she's Irish, and she could see it in my eyes. And so I called her. I said, I'm thinking of quitting my job to write a book. And she says, darling, you will never learn to fly if you don't jump off the cliff. And that was it. She said that. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, let's go. And in some ways, I'm probably at that point again. And it's kind of interesting story to be telling right now. But that she said, you will never. And I was a complete instant failure when I did that because, like I said, that book was rejected everywhere. I thought that I'd quickly be making money and my fame and fortune, and it took 3 years to even hold the book in my hands, and I felt like a huge failure. But every single obstacle that came on the plans that never manifested, right? That I just kept pushing and pushing. Every obstacle made it more successful, and if my plan had worked, I'm sure I would have had a mid-list book and had to go back into work into some newsroom in an industry that was dying. And instead, I had that great adventure, knowing from what they all said was that what you get is the knowledge. And this is a really important point because a lot of times we try to achieve goals because I want to write a book, I want to be an author, I want to do this. But actually, when I had that perspective they gave me, it was I wanted to learn what these people said when I was interviewing them. And then I wanted to have this experience where I took a chance on myself and where I pushed and persevered. It's like, was that lesson about being an author or was it about being a human? And when you find yourself hitting the wall, you have to remember you're still here in Earth School. You're learning to be a better version of who you are. And so the pressure isn't to achieve some status or goal. It's to find out who you are and get out of this world being happy and fulfilled.
It's loving and learning the process, not being so married to the outcome or output, right? Because that's where all the magic happens. And you hear this so often from the people who have achieved big goals, big, scary goals is, that finest moment wasn't when they it wasn't about the fact that the medal was around my neck. It was the fact of I realized how hard I had worked and it paid off, and the pride I felt in that and what I was able to accomplish, not the.
Right. Well, think about it. When you graduate, you wear the cap and gown. Is it that day? It's, you have two things going on in your head when you graduate from anything. It's like, wow, look at that experience. And then, what am I going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
Because that moment at the top of the mountain, like Stacey Allison said, that's quick.
Yeah.
And you're going to take a look around and see the mountains and that beautiful view. But then it's like, you got to take some action. And if the goalpost is always going to move, then you have to enjoy that movement.
Mm-hmm. And who you're with doing it, right? With you, the relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you have with your support team around you to truly make it as pleasurable along the path as possible, because you need those people. And that's why, so many folks that are trying to do it all alone, they fall short or it's not as fulfilling. You gotta have your circle around you.
Now, okay. I've said, now tell me if you agree with this. It took me decades to learn that a big amount of the stress and difficulty in my life came because I was trying to avoid an uncomfortable conversation.
Oh, God.
Okay.
So you just wanted to walk me into this conversation, didn't you?
I did. I didn't have any idea. I thought I was talking about myself.
But
it's that because people stay in bad jobs, in bad relationships, because they don't want to say something that's going to hurt somebody else's feelings, right?
Yes.
And even as a leader, you don't want it. And it's like, how long are you going to not have that uncomfortable conversation? Because sooner or later, you have to have it, right?
Or eat you out inside, you get sick, right? All the bad things happen if you don't.
It's like sooner or later. And how long does an uncomfortable conversation take? It takes 3 to 15 minutes. And I have a really good story, and I'm not telling it right now because it's funny and no, I'm going to tell it.
I was going to say, why aren't you just leaving us on edge?
Well, okay. So we all know I love to kayak, but I also have met some amazing people along the Weeki Wachee River in Florida, one of them being my friend, who is the oldest living performing mermaid. And she is raised in the tradition of Southern hospitality. And she is so good and kind to everybody and would, wait on people hand and foot. But as she got into her 70s, it became clear to me she wasn't enjoying all of that Southern hospitality. And in fact, she probably never was, but just did it because she was raised to have to be nice to people. And she tells me that, and I'm going to change the name of this person because I don't want to totally humiliate her, but one person who was a friend of hers was going to be coming with her mother for a week or 10 days. I think it was 10 days. And she's like, I can't stand it. She comes here, her mother sits on that back deck, sits on her butt, smoking cigarettes the entire time, doesn't lift a finger, just sits there smoking cigarettes. I said, and I call this woman Granny. I said, Granny, just tell her not to come. I can't do that. I said, yes, you can. It is an uncomfortable conversation. An uncomfortable conversation takes 3 to 15 minutes. That's all you have to do is say, I can't do that. Suit yourself. So, a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, she bringing her mother, and that woman just sits there on that back deck with her on her butt smoking cigarettes. I said, tell her not to bring her mother. I can't do that. I wasn't ready to say that's fine, but you know what that means? What? She's coming back next year. Right? And there's dead silence. Dead silence. Okay. So the next morning at 7 a.m., my phone rings and I look and it says, Grandma. And I said, hey, what's going on? She says, well, I did it. I said, what'd you do? She goes, I had an uncomfortable conversation. I said, really? What'd you say? I said, Cindy, you are welcome to visit me and stay whenever you want, but just you. Only you. And I said, really? And I said, what'd she say? And she goes, nothing. And I said, and see, it just took 3 to 15 minutes. She goes, 15 seconds. But the point of this is that, we will avoid a conversation like that. And many times it's not something that simple. It's like, I want a divorce or whatever. But you avoid. Where if you can just kind of vomit up the words, it's over. You're going to have to do it. And if you just get used to having uncomfortable conversations, they get so much easier. I've gotten to the point where there was one day where I had to have 2 really difficult conversations, and they were by phone, and I did them both in the same 5-minute spread. And I thought, I have really made some progress here. But it's that you have to figure out what you're going to say, and you just say, this is an uncomfortable conversation, and you say it. And I had to have a very uncomfortable conversation with somebody once, and it made me sad to say it. But I had to do it, and I was trying to avoid it. And my friend, she says, isn't there some motivational speaker who talks about uncomfortable conversations? Like, I got rid of that problem, because if you are true to yourself and say what you have to say, you don't let yourself be victimized by circumstance or by other people who might be manipulating you.
Or just completely eating yourself up. That's what always would happen to me, is it just would be destroying me inside because I'm having that conversation with myself. The one I need to be having with the other person, I have had with myself for 12 hours. It's gone on for days, hours, weeks, months. And yes, the lead in with, I need to have an uncomfortable conversation sort of helps you take a deep breath and then go, blah, here it is.
Oh my God.
You helped me with that. It's still totally uncomfortable because I hate the confrontation and I just hate it. But I get so proud of myself whenever I do it because I feel you on my shoulder going, just have the uncomfortable conversation.
3 to 15 minutes. Somebody saw me speak and had been in touch with me before, during, and after. And I make friends with a lot of these people, but I don't really know them. And she told me that as the thing was winding down, she wanted to come and stay with me at my house. And I'm thinking, I don't even know you. And I just looked at her and I said, I got to have an uncomfortable conversation. I said, I will take you kayaking, but I don't let people come in my house unless they're my good friends. I had to say that. But okay, what's the alternative? I mean, tell me.
You're just resentful. You do it and you're resentful the whole time. You're
Right.
stressed, and then you get bitter, and it's damaging even to how you even perceive that person that maybe is very important to your life, because you hold it against them.
Right.
Whenever really you have a lot of control yourself to just deal with it. And it's so funny that 9 times out of 10, there are exceptions, but 9 times out of 10, it goes way better than this hot mess of stuff.
It went well, but I have to tell you, she never did speak to me again.
Well, you know what?
So what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if me saying, I don't know, I mean, this is somebody I don't know. I don't want somebody I don't know in my home. And it's like, if me telling that truth and setting that boundary is enough to kill a potential friendship, then that's not a friendship.
And that's probably not a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So people, it's, you know, you can stay in a really bad situation for way too long because you're trying to avoid saying a few words. And my advice there is to just say it. Just say it.
I'm vouching for. I'm still learning. I'm on the infancy learning curve of this, but I do stand behind what you're saying.
Well, and you know, the whole idea, we did that whole podcast on boundaries, which I think is so important. And if you didn't hear that, please, we had Kim Mara as our guest. And you got to be able to put the fence up around you where you need it. Yeah. And you're in charge of you. And if there are things that are making you unhappy, first thing you have to ask yourself is, what do I have to own in this? Right. How much am I in control here? And then, am I going to take action? Michelle, do you have some, or do you want me to keep going on my list?
No, I think we're probably ready to wrap.
Oh, well, we're ready to wrap. Okay, people. Well, we will see you next week.
This was some good little takeaways and little stories. I'm curious what resonated and what people are wondering about.
Yeah, I would love to hear people telling me about their plans and about, you know,
the plans that didn't work out and what it led to, because that's the other side. It usually leads somewhere better.
And I would love to hear from someone who told me, yeah, once I made it, I've found unbridled success, because I'm still waiting on that story. I don't hear that one very often. So
I don't either.
Anyhow, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you and speak to you next week.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.